And tonight on the Daily Wrap, President Obama taking aim at the Supreme Court ahead of his decision on the future of Obamacare. But wait till you hear the mixed messages coming from Americans on the controversial law. Crime is on the rise in New York City. Is the mayor's stance against stop and frisk to blame? And Marco Rubio makes lemons out of lemonade after the New York Times embarrasses itself with a pathetic hit piece on Mrs. Rubio's driving record. The details coming up. We discuss all of that, plus potluck, yay or nay. This is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And hello, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Wrap, along with my co-host, Rick Unger. We welcome you back from one hell of a weekend at the Belmont.
I'm telling you.
You called it.
Did you? I did, didn't I?
Yes, I did.
It was, I wish I had gone. It was so exciting.
Amazing, right?
I was watching it at home on TV. It was great.
It was the exact opposite of Tiger Woods' golf swing, right?
That's exactly right.
Yes. This is not a sports show, by the way, everybody.
Yeah,
we discussing
but it was the
other
weekend,
things.
so.
Indeed. So welcome and thank you for being here with us. We appreciate it. Joining us as well, we have in yellow tonight, Heather Hansen, looking quite summery. And, of course, Bill Tucker. Thank you, Bill.
Not in yellow.
Yeah, not in yellow.
I was trying to match with the tie.
That's right. Got some summer going on there.
Well, well done, sir. Okay. So, anyway, thanks for joining, everybody. We appreciate it. So, by the way, go to newsmax.com right now, /comments, newsmax.com/comments, to weigh in on all of today's hot stories. You could also talk about Heather's outfit, whatever you like. We want feedback. Okay, time for the daily download. And President Obama takes a jab at the Supreme Court ahead of its month's ruling on Obamacare. Justices will decide on a challenge aimed at subsidies for premiums for more than 6 million low and middle income Americans.
This should be an easy case. Frankly, it probably shouldn't even been taken up. I'm optimistic that the Supreme Court will play it straight when it comes to the interpretation. And B, I should mention that if it didn't, Congress could fix this whole thing with a one-sentence provision.
A couple more uhs there than usual, as if he was drinking in the morning or something. More on that in a moment.
Oh.
It was non-alcoholic beer. I'll give it away. Anyway, the plaintiffs in the case argued that the president signed legislation that allowed only federal subsidies on state-run exchanges, not for those in states that use federal exchange. The federal exchange. If the court agrees, more than 6 million people in 34 states who use the federal exchange would lose their financial aid. Some saber rattling by the president, Rick Unger, working the refs a little bit?
Yeah, I have to say, I agree with a lot of what the president said on this, but I did disagree with his comment about the Supreme Court should never have taken this. I think the Supreme Court was absolutely right to take this up. Look, you know, there's a question here that's a fundamental question. What did Congress intend? Does the language represent what they intended? And if it doesn't, don't you look at what the language says to discern what a law means? What's fascinating about this, everybody presumes that it was some kind of a mistake Congress made. I don't think so. I actually think Congress did intend the language because they presumed that if they tied the subsidies to the state exchanges, the states, of course, would want the subsidies and would put their own exchanges. Didn't work out that way, but you know what? Supreme Court's there to come up with the right answer.
Yeah, I mean, the words that we're talking about is in the law, it says subsidies created by the states, 4 words. Those 4 words are what's going to decide this thing. But for him to say that the Supreme Court should not have taken it is really disingenuous. And I would point out that he's been wrong, despite the fact being a constitutional scholar, on a whole number of things of late. Immigration. His lawyers have been really chastised.
He's been right on a bunch, too. He was right today on the Israeli passport case.
Big deal.
What is the big deal? You can't say he's wrong on a lot and not recognize when he's right.
Important things. The immigration, the fact that a lot of his Justice Department lawyers have been chastised like crazy by lawyers for IRS issues, a whole lot of stuff. So we'll see what the Supreme Court does here, but to say that they shouldn't have taken it is really disingenuous.
How do you think they'll rule, ultimately?
I actually think that they're going to rule against it because here's the thing. They don't care what we think of them. Their job is not to care what we think of them. This is why they are not elected. That's why their job is to be appointed. Their job is to look at the statute and determine what it says and what it was meant to say.
But they do care. They do care. They are I don't know which
they're
way they're
human.
going to come down, but they are mindful of the fact that should they rule against the government, this is going to cause a fiasco of unbelievable proportions.
Bill, do you think that, and this is just the dumb guy who obviously doesn't have a law degree, more looking at the political end of this, or maybe the human part of it.
Usually you're the smart guy if you don't have a lot.
I like to play different roles. I like to be unpredictable. I'm rebranding myself. Do you think that John Roberts will be, after all the backlash he got from conservatives, will be thinking, oh good, a do-over. Better get it right this time. Just thinking out loud.
You know, well, you're speaking to the only other guy on this panel that doesn't have a law degree either. So I don't know the answer to that. I really don't know. I mean, I think it's silly to argue they shouldn't have taken it up because the words are there, and words, as we know, in law do in fact matter. So.
Okay.
Can I get one quick thing? I know we have to move on. Remember, if the Supreme Court does strike this down, it's the Republicans who suffer because they have nothing ready to fix it with.
It'll be very interesting to see what the alternatives are when that happens, and obviously a big 2016 issue. Well, there's some new polling out today on Obamacare. A new CNN poll finds majority of Americans are still opposed to Obamacare, 55%, 43% approving, matching a previous high set in 2013. A poll, not mentioned in this poll, by the way, the Affordable Care Act, now polling at 79% approval. Anyway, that goes back to a Kimmel thing where he went on the street, he asked people about the Affordable Care Act, they all loved it, Obamacare they didn't like. Sometimes it's about branding. But an ABC News Washington Post poll finds that when asked about the Supreme Court and if they should block Obamacare subsidies in this upcoming ruling, 55% say they should not be blocked. Obamacare remains unpopular, yet people don't want the subsidies taken away. How do you account for this discrepancy, Bill Tucker?
Did they do cross comparison between the people who receive subsidies? How many people receive subsidies under Obamacare? Because I suspect that if you've
Not
signed up,
55% of
I don't
the
know. I
country.
mean, I'm asking a question I don't know the answer to. Very unlawyerly of me, as a matter of fact. But you know, if you're getting subsidized health care, why would you want your subsidy taken away, whether you liked it or not?
Well, maybe we're a generous nation. We just don't like to hear about the details of stuff.
I think people like the status quo. You know, the devil you know is better than the devil that you don't know. And right now, there's no solution. You know, and President Obama was very clear on that today, that he doesn't intend to come up with a solution. He's going to leave that to Congress. So I think people think, well, what's the alternative? We don't know. We may as well be happy with what we get.
That goes back to your point that
To be
without
fair,
an alternative
it's Congress
to
who
look at.
has to come up with it. That was like a jab at the president for something he has no control over. Congress would have to fix it. There's no getting around that. But what it really tells us there's no getting around, people don't understand what they like and don't like. You can't be for the subsidies and against the law. They are the same thing.
Wow, well, 79% of people know that. Anyway, as the Supreme Court gets ready to rule in some key cases this month, the same poll finds about half of Americans don't have much faith in the justices. Only 50% say they have a moderate amount of trust in the Supreme Court when it comes to Obamacare. On same-sex marriage, 49%. Overall, the High Court has a 52% approval rating. Okay, Heather Hansen, what do you make of these numbers? Can I give you my theory first?
Sure.
They don't trust their ability to handle something like same-sex marriages because they're seen as old people that are out of touch.
Right.
Right. I mean, what the average age of the Supreme Court, I think, is 69.6 right now.
Yes,
The average
yeah.
age when they retire is almost 79. So
Yeah.
maybe they say they're probably smart, they just don't get it.
I think that that's probably the case. I think Citizens United in the law and campaign finance really struck a problem for the American public and their trust in the Supreme Court. But I think people who actually follow them, I mean, the understanding is that they're going to be just fine with same-sex marriage. For those that support same-sex marriage, they will be happy about it. And the Obamacare thing, I think it's a little bit higher there because they feel as though, as you said, these are older people who sort of want to maintain the status quo.
Bert, do you think that the Supreme Court is seen the same way that government is, that it's polarized, and they most of the time, John Roberts being the exception, just rule along party lines?
Interesting question. I think it is probably seen that way, but I think in this particular poll, I think it has more to do, if you think you know how the Supreme Court's going to rule on those two issues and you like it, then you're with them. If you don't like what you think's going to happen, then you think they don't know what they're doing.
That makes total sense. If they came in at 52%,
Yeah.
clearly.
Exactly. And thank you. You articulated that well, because I'm sitting
Thank
here
you.
thinking.
Good night, folks.
Yeah, good night. We can go away now. No, that if you think they're going to rule the way you think, you have faith in them. If you think they're going to come down on the other side of the issue, you're like, I don't know about that.
You know what I read today? Very interesting. Being a 44-year-old. I reveal my age on this show, that Clarence Thomas was actually appointed when he was 43, and he was the youngest ever to be appointed.
Yeah.
That's right.
At 43, imagine like me on the Supreme Court.
He's bringing down the averages, he and John Roberts.
And John
Yeah.
Wright, that's right.
I mean, it actually sounds funny when you hear 69.
Yeah, seriously.
Because they're so
And
old.
Ginsburg,
Yeah.
81. So coming up next, questions arise over a Texas pool party gone bad. We'll discuss that next. Keep it right here.